Welcome to the Rethink Leadership podcast with me, Jeremy Blaine. I interview leaders, experts and business professionals from around the world who are bringing leadership principles and know-how into the digitally driven 21st century workplace, with focus firmly on the how-to rather than the what. Each episode is in aid of a charity chosen by my guests, and since 2020, we've made donations to over 80 global and local causes. Welcome to the Rethink Leadership podcast with my guest, Dr. Katie Best, a leadership coach, consultant, author and visiting fellow at the London School of Economics and Political Science. Katie has recently published her new book, The 10 Toughest Leadership Problems and How to Solve Them. Katie helps FTSE 100 companies, founders, non-profits, boards and leaders gain clarity and confidence, unlocking positive action through solving the tough problems and barriers to progress. And that's at the heart of her book. We discuss this and the real-world challenges leaders face today, from motivating teams under pressure to managing organisational change. Katie provides examples of the practical, evidence-based strategies for tackling these challenges effectively and takes us through her SOLVE model, which helps leaders everywhere accelerate progress. This episode is in aid of Save the Children International, to which we've made a donation as a thank you to Katie for joining us. Katie, thank you very much for joining me. Please tell us about yourself, your career, and your book, The 10 Toughest Leadership Problems and How to Solve Them.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Jeremy. It's great to meet you. So I'm a leadership coach and consultant and educator. I've spent the last 2 decades working with leaders and senior leaders across all sorts of sectors, including professional services, culture and creative industries, government, etc., working with them on their leadership challenges. So I spend my time split between coaching, exec ed, etc. And out of that, I recognised that people were coming to me regularly with the same sorts of problems. And so the book that we're going to be talking about today, The 10 Toughest Leadership Problems and How to Solve Them, came out of that work as a leadership coach and consultant, seeing these common patterns, realising that I was using a particular tool that I'd kind of created in my head to help people solve these problems, and wanted to share that through a book, through looking at these 10 common problems.
And it's a great way of consolidating what you've learned and what leaders are going through, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm perhaps going to ask you an unfair question.
That's okay. I like
straight
unfair
off the
questions.
bat here, which is you've identified these 10 toughest problems that leaders face today, but we've got to start somewhere. So what would you say came out as maybe the top 3 or the most consistent 3? And why do you think they make it to the top of the list?
Yeah, so that question does cause me physical pain, but nonetheless, I am going to go ahead and answer it. So the one that for me floats right to the very top, because I see it no matter what level leaders are at, remains personal effectiveness, and that connected with burnout as well. Because I think so often people get promoted, they get these jobs, and they're just so squeezed for time. And there's that real tension between feeling guilty if they're not working all the hours, but then feeling guilty if they're not seeing their friends, family, not doing exercise, not walking to work, whatever it might be. And so that constant dilemma of, am I doing enough and how can I maximize the value of my time? So personal effectiveness and challenges with that and how to manage that definitely for me comes out at the top of the list. The second area that I would really highlight would be decision making. I think at the moment, decision making is particularly challenging and will continue to be so, because we're all inundated with just so much data and so many key points. We don't want to make a mistake. We're in a very litigious society. And so making high quality decisions effectively, quickly, is another thing that leaders really struggle with. Interestingly, that's not a problem that they often directly bring to me, but it will be something that kind of emerges as we're talking, that what they're really thinking about here is how difficult it is to decide whether to do A, B, or C. And then the third area is around engagement and performance. And I think, again, this has been on the agenda for years, but it went up a massive level once we all started working from home so much. And also because I think quite rightly, younger generations are asking questions about what does it all mean and why am I spending all my time doing a job that I don't love? So having that sense of really engaging your team as a leader. How do you do that? What happens when their performance drops off or their engagement drops off? Again, is another problem that I think floats to the top of the pile.
Oh, I recognize those as well. In fact, the first one around personal effectiveness, you talk about burnout, guilt, etc. Did some research myself on this globally last year, and 45% of those leaders that we interview say they weren't confident about the future. When you've got a
Yeah.
lack of confidence, you're questioning this, you're working harder, you're doing all of these things that you're talking about. And then the fear is about the decision making. Am I going right or left or whatever?
Definitely.
And in some cases, leaders are struggling with knowing what to do when they don't know what to do, frankly,
Yeah.
in this world.
Yeah.
So really, I understand that as well from what I'm seeing out there. And you sort of mention the fact that also, the way business is at the moment and the state that we're in at the moment is a huge transformational time.
Yeah.
We're being impacted by digital workforce, AI, business model transformation. So I'm interested to know that had you have written that book 10 years ago,
Yeah.
which problems on that list may have been missing, which are really central now, and which have become significantly harder to solve in this uncertain, unpredictable world.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to return to engagement again
Yeah.
as an initial point with both of those things. I think 10 years ago, we were only starting to think about engagement, think about those issues. When I consider companies that I've run leadership programs for a long period of time, so I've got quite a lot of data to compare, there's been a real shift from leadership development being about making us good leaders to being about that interrelationship between the leader and the team member and how to make that sparkle, and that as a key way in which to um, engage your team, make your team much more into the work that they're doing. Those interpersonal relationships are absolutely critical. Um, I think one sort of question, which is not quite the question that you asked, but just AI is very much missing from this book. And similarly, there's not, I've got a chapter on hybrid working, but that if I wrote this book again in 10 years, maybe that wouldn't be a chapter in and of itself anymore, because maybe it just compounds all the problems in the other chapters. So actually hybrid makes performance harder, it makes engagement harder, it makes decision making harder. It's maybe not a problem in and of itself. So I mean, choosing the 10 was really difficult. And then similarly, AI, I mean, it's mad how far it's come. So, when I started writing the book, I'm actually really pleased. The whole idea of generative AI really wasn't there. So there was not even slightly a temptation to run this stuff through AI to write it. This is all by my hand. However, now wouldn't it be interesting to that change has happened so quickly? Would I feel comfortable enough introducing a chapter on AI and the challenges it brings if I rewrite it? Potentially, yes, although I would need to do a lot of research to make sure that it was well evidenced.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one because by the time you've written that
Yeah,
as well, AI's moved on. We're on to
exactly.
artificial general intelligence, then
Yeah,
super intelligence, and I
yeah,
mean, crikey, what's next? So
yeah,
you've got to be somewhere. And I think with what you've talked about though so far within these leadership challenges, there's so much of it feels like an intensely human behavior or endeavor or challenge. Is that fair?
yeah, definitely. I think that's always my approach. So my background has always been very much from sociology, psychology. My PhD kind of sat between those two areas and really interested in what makes leaders tick and how they engage with other people, how they communicate, how they think about things like strategy and culture and that interface between themselves and the organization. And because ultimately leadership is incredibly human, it is us talking to other people and trying to get them to do something. So if we ignore the human in there, we're ignoring 99% of what leadership is.
Yeah, leadership is a human endeavor, no question about it. I mean, even
Yeah,
more so now,
yeah,
for many of the reasons that you've talked about. So
definitely.
across your, of course, the all important element of your book is around, right, how do we move the dial at moving forward? And you advocate across these 10 big
Yeah,
issues, challenges, problems for evidence-based strategies. And
Yes.
yet you've still got leaders out there. You've got traditional leaders who are being informed by the past. You've got
Yeah.
leaders who are heavily informed on gut instinct of how they tackle things, either then or what it feels like now. So how do you take those elements from the book and advise leaders that you work with to handle a situation where perhaps the evidence suggests to go left,
Yeah.
but their intuition, the culture, the way we've done things is pulling them in the opposite direction?
Yeah, and I think that's why the model that I use at the heart of the book is so important. So for your listeners, it's SOLVE, helpfully spelled solve. Um, Initially getting people to state their problem in a very crisp way. That's the S for solve, is state your problem. But then the second stage, O, open the box, is all about slowing down and really unpacking that problem and not bringing your prior assumptions to that problem solving, but actually asking people questions, looking at what's already been written about engagement or challenges in your industry or whatever might be going on for you, and really holding back from that sense of, I must act, I must take action now, or I know what to do because I've seen this before. Putting all of that in balance with a much wider data set and really understanding what's going on with the problem before you take action. And it is frustrating, I think, when leaders just leap in with a solution and go, I wonder why that didn't work this time. And you're like, well, it's a different situation, which if you just scratch the surface a bit, you would see that you've got a really different team to what you had 5 years ago. So what might have worked to motivate the team of 5 years ago is not going to motivate the team that you've got today.
Yes, I'd agree completely with that. And that flex or that ability to be adaptable as a leader now is
Yeah.
perhaps one of those strengths that they need to lean into. Is that what you're finding?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you need flexibility, but you also need like very open ears and real receptivity to what you're seeing in your environment. I think good leaders now are very good at sensing what's going on and really not just using intuition, but using the data, using the things that are out there in the broader landscape to say, okay, I discern a situation here that needs a solution, and I'm going to go
Yeah.
further in doing this.
So I'm interested. You mentioned your solve model
Yeah,
around this, and it makes a lot of sense with how you started to explain that. So perhaps I'm being a little bit unfair here, but is
yeah,
there an example you could give us of, you don't have to name names, but a leader
yeah.
that you may have worked with where they've had a particular problem, you've gone through this and it's really changed things for them in a positive way?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if we just think about a situation that I worked with a leader on recently, so they'd got a team that really weren't performing and they could not work out what was going on. So, initially getting them to use the S to state the problem in one sentence, and they're kind of going, well, Matt's doing this, and Teresa's doing this, and someone else is doing this. No, no, no. What's the problem? And the problem was there was not consistent performance across the team. And the impact was that when they were reporting upwards, this manager was getting in a lot of trouble because the team were not performing to the standard, as well as clients not being happy and everything else. So then getting that leader to open the box and to look at why the performance had shifted. And what he found was he'd got a team who were really uncomfortable in some parts with the new tech that they were being asked to use, the new systems. There'd been system upgrades. People didn't feel that they were well enough trained. And then another part of the team who just really weren't clicking with hybrid working. And so, two very different places that the performance issues were coming from. But the opening the box revealed this. He did lots of chatting to people, which he found really uncomfortable. But I was like, you've just got to do this. And that's how he found this out. And he said he found it really enlightening that he'd got this input, this data that was so far removed from his lens. He just thought people weren't performing because they were lazy. It was like classic old school leadership, but it was something very different. So then the L of the model, lay out your solution. Through doing the conversations, through looking at, he'd almost got a solution already because he recognized that they needed tech training. And then the other half of the team needed some sort of intervention with hybrid working. And so then he just needed to do some work at looking at what the options there might be, because the organization as a whole wasn't going to change its policy. And I'm being a bit vague on the details because the specifics will give away too much, but they had to be quite careful in terms of making any changes, but getting people to be more comfortable with hybrid working, allowing more coming into the office for some, a bit less for others, but still within the parameters, gave that flexibility that could have calmed people down. Then but at the L stage, you're just planning it, you're not doing it. Then the V is venture forth with an exclamation mark intentionally there as a kind of, right, this is the rallying cry. You've got your solution, you need to go for it. And it's recognizing that that solution might not always be perfect. You've got to work really hard to optimize it. And you've also got to see if something's not quite right and be prepared to change or pivot to make sure that it beds in really well. So, for example, with getting people to do the training, it's not enough to just provide the training. You've got to take a record of, are people showing up? You need a test at the end to check that they've done it, and to optimize the solution that you've come up with in that particular case to make sure it gets done. And then the final stage that he used, so the final stage of the model is E, elevate your learning. So it's recognizing that in going through any problem, you change as a leader, you gain new skills or knowledge, and you can use this wisdom in other settings. So it's not just a wasted thing that goes back in the drawer or the cupboard once this problem is solved. So interestingly, one of the things that he recognized was actually it's not that uncomfortable having conversations with people, and he should do more of that. And so he began, like, I see you laughing because it is hilarious, but it is such a common thing with leaders that if they're from a particular way of leading, they don't think to do that. So he was like, oh, this can be really enlightening. I'm going to have these conversations a lot more. But then the second thing that he realized is that because he had to work through these challenges with hybrid working, he found other teams, not his team, were also having those problems. So he became a really good resource for the organisation to use to go and talk to other teams about how you could work within the hybrid working rules, but still give your team what they need to try and improve their performance. So that's just like one example of a leader that I coached, simplified a bit to not give away those details, but hopefully gives a flavour about how you step through the 5 stages of the model.
Oh, that was really valuable, Katie. And it strikes me that certainly in this situation, and maybe for many, that open the box piece, the second stage, the O, seems to be the critical one where it's right, take a step back, take some time to either think, spend time with the people and realize the power in that. And then, as you then said, actually almost the solution starts to fall from that anyway, making the next few steps go. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, it's the open the box bit that is so often uncomfortable for people. And recognizing that if you can just do it and have that bravery, you will get a lot from it. It's one of the things, if you get executives going back in to do an MBA, for example, they might not see the research methods parts that they do of the program as being valuable, but they probably learn a lot from those qualitative research methods of just having those conversations and also doing a bit of desk-based research about what other people have said, as much as they do from the finance or the HR that they're learning.
Got it. Yeah. It's really actually important now that leaders who are struggling in this area really just get into the how to and getting through this, solving the problems, working with their people much closer. So I know that, we have many leaders who regularly tune into this podcast, and it is all about the how to, and that's I think where we have the most impact for people tuning in is that, right, can I take something away from this? And what you've just explained there, you already can. But I'd like to ask you as a leadership expert now generally as well, what do you see as the must-dos on executives' agendas for 2026? And based on the problems that you're seeing and through your book, the 2 or 3 actions that leaders can take to accelerate progress.
Yeah, so first of all, in terms of what they need to do on that executive agenda, I think a lot for me is really about making decisions at the right speed and the right quality. So balancing that tension between, I just want to make this decision now because it's, or solve this problem because it's stressful, all the way to leaders at the very other end of the spectrum who go, I don't want to solve this problem at all because it's stressful. So I'm just going to sit on it until it becomes too big and then I can't, I may not be able to solve it anymore. It's finding that confidence and that space and that middle ground to recognize this is difficult. It's not going to get solved overnight, but I need to carve out some space to try to solve this problem. So I think a must do is stop ignoring that difficult stuff. Or if you're at the other end, stop rushing that difficult stuff and get into a good place with that material. And I think, it's particularly relevant for 2026 because of what we've been talking about with all the data that we've got, the complexity of the world. You're probably, as a leader, just acquiring more and more problems, if we're honest. So starting to solve some of those is a good idea. In terms of what actions leaders can take right now, I think one of the most powerful things is recognizing that leadership is just a series of conversations and a series of small actions. And so if you see that there are problems with your leadership, rather than thinking I need to go on a really expensive course and I need to change everything and I must follow this person's approach or this person's approach, think about what you can do today that starts to move the dial of making you a better leader. And if you just have to pick some things at random, here are some for you. Go and have a conversation with someone on your team that you haven't spoken to very much for the last few weeks or months. Maybe take them out for a coffee, ask them what makes them tick. What are they enjoying about work at the moment? What are they not liking? If this is coming out of absolutely nowhere, by the way, clarify for them that this is not a career development conversation. They are not in trouble. You've got some time. It's the beginning of the year and you want to use that time chatting to people. I think a second thing that you can do is stop being passive. So just stop acting like everything happens to you, particularly if you're a middle manager. It doesn't. You have meaningful choices that you can make and actions that you can take to solve problems. So picking out something where you are just going, oh, it's too much and I can't cope with it. Start coping with it. Come up with what is the very first small step that you would take to try to solve that problem. And then have a go at doing it. And then obviously my third one is go and use the solve model and see how it works. And you can scale it up and deal with a really big problem with it. You can scale it down and use it for a morning trying to deal with the problem. You could use it with your team in a workshop with something that you're all facing at the same time, but go and get stuck into doing that.
And it makes a lot of sense, Katie, with the example that you gave before too. And I particularly like what you just said there around taking that difficult stuff and moving with the right cadence, but also move with intention, do something about it. Don't let it all kind of happen to you. I think that's great. So how do those tuning in here get hold of your book, find out more about your services, Katie, and connect with you to continue the discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. So my book's available everywhere. So Amazon, Waterstones if you're in the UK. So please do buy it. There's also an audiobook, which was very fun to record. So if you would rather hear me talking to you on your morning run, then that's available on Amazon as well. I also share lots of practical ideas and reflections on LinkedIn. So find me on LinkedIn, it's Dr. Katie Best, or you can sign up for my newsletter, Dear Katie. You can find the link to do that on my website, which is www.katiebest.com. And then finally, if you're interested in workshops, coaching, getting me in to talk to your company about the Solve model or run some leadership workshops, you can also find my contact details on the website or on LinkedIn too.
Great. Well, absolutely fabulous stuff. So, Dr. Katie Best, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rethink Leadership podcast with me, Jeremy Blaine. Please like, comment and support us on your favourite platform and subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch as well as listen to each episode.